Shalom lekulam, and welcome to our weekly study in the Parsha. This week's Parsha is Parsha Eikev. We're going to study two subjects as we study this Parsha. One of the subjects is Eikev itself. The word Eikev can be translated as because and also as heal. And we're also going to study through this Parsha as well the act of proper eating and what are the spiritual implications and what type of meditations we should have when we're eating. So two subjects, the word ekev and also the act of eating. So don't go away and stay with us so we can continue the study. Welcome back. The Parsha Eikev starts in the following way. It says, "V'hayeh Eikev tis maon et hamishpatim," and it shall be because you listen to these laws. That's the first words that it has, and the word Eikev, which is the second word in this Parsha when this Parsha starts. It's translated as because, Ekev. However, when we look at the word itself, Ekev, actually means heal. So what we're gonna study, through this parsha is the word heal and how that actually is going to help us understand what the Parsha or what Moshe was actually saying during this time, or what he was implying, and what is the code behind the words that he was saying. So, we're gonna start using Rabbi Yaakov Haseira when he actually is talking about the Zohar, specifically Zohar Volume 2, page 258a. It says that the final redemption will not arrive until we have reached the very bottom of the feet. In other words, they are holy people, and opposite them, they are evil people. The evil people contain sparks of holiness from head to toe, and the final redemption will not arrive until all these sparks are extracted and elevated without a single one remaining, not even the lowest of them all, in the very bottom of the feet. All of these sparks will be extracted from the evil people and will enter the holy person, including the very bottom of his feet. This is identical to the final exile of Rome and Ishmael, which are symbolized by the heel of the statue. For this reason, our sages call the end of exile the heels of the Messiah, Mashiach. That's going to be on Talmud Sota 49b. In other words, once the sparks of holiness are extracted from the heels, Mashiach will arrive. So basically what it's telling us here is that good and evil people, and we want to make sure that we keep this in context, that we're studying the word Ekev from Parsha Eikev, and Ekev can be translated into heal. So what Rabbi Yaakov Haseira is trying to tell us here is that basically that the end of redemption, the time of redemption, is called a heal. And at the very bottom, the feet, are basically sparks of holiness as well. And these sparks need to be redeemed. And as we study the proper meaning or the proper way or proper meditation as well, of eating, we're going to see how these two concepts align together. So what we're now going to see is that he's talking about that our sages call the end of exile the hill of Mashiach. And he mentions two exiles, and these exiles are the exile of Rome and Ishmael. Why is called the exile of Rome and Ishmael? Because after the destruction of the Second Temple, the people of Israel were scattered all over the nations. And eventually, some of those nations that were basically under the Roman Empire, under the Roman Empire's, the Roman Empire's rule, and they fell over the Ottoman Empire's rule after that. And that's going to be the countries on the north of Africa, all the way from Turkey, Middle East, North Africa, all the way to Spain. And in these areas, the Jews were living there as well. So they also became subjects of the Ottoman Empire. And even though the Ottoman Empire was kind of an empire in which the Jewish people, especially in Spain, they flourished and they were able to do certain things that were basically an advancement for spirituality and philosophy as well, they were still kind of like second-class citizens. You know, they needed to pay a special tax to this empire. So, and also they were not allowed to go to the land of what was called then Palestine, after the Romans named it Palestine in order to insult the Jews, because the Philistines were the worst enemy the Jews have in the past. They called the land Palestine in order to insult the Jews. And then the Jews, when the Ottoman Empire, came to power, were not allowed to settle on that land anyway. So, and there's even a story that they even cover the door where the Messiah was to enter, according to Jewish tradition. So the Ishmaelites covered that door, which we can see it, in pictures when they show the walls of Jerusalem. You can see that door covered with stones in order to stop the Messiah from coming into Jerusalem as it was prophesied. Right. So, what is the heels of the Messiah? Well, the heels of the Messiah, I'm going to show you a picture here. Is basically this part over here where we find ourselves right now. So what you're going to find is the following. You're going to find yourself in the beginning of the history of man as a spiritual being that came to a physical realm. Before that, it was just the body developing itself in the animal level, but as the body that was developing itself in the physical level, there were some forces working what we call above, or in the spiritual realm. When Adam committed the sin, he fell into a physical body that was already prepared over here as a man. Adam became then a physical being. He was clothed in skin. And from this time on, you're going to see the generations of Adam, the generations of Noah, the generations of the people from Babylon, from Migdal Babel, which is the Tower of Babel, all the way to what we have here is Abraham until he was born, right? And then after that, we're going to have the story of the descendants of Abraham all the way to Jacob's children until they descended to Mitzrayim, Egypt. And those are 200 years of Tohu. And remember, when we say 2,000 years, not 200 years, 2,000 years, we're not saying that the development of man as we know man today was done in 2,000 years. That's not correct. It's been millions of years for that development of the body, right? What we're talking here is about 2,000 years since man recognized that there was a force above, that he was a spiritual being, all right? So it's from here to Mitzrayim, 2,000 years of man development in that sense. So those years were called the years of Tohu, or chaos, right? Then after that, what we're gonna have is the ego, which is around the time of the Tower of Babel, start growing. That's why we see the development of civilizations and all that, right? And developments of different technologies to create big or bigger infrastructure, bigger than the Tower of Babel, right? So that's what we're gonna see all the way to these days, which call it the years of Mashiach. But during these years, after the years of Tohu, we have the year for the 2,000 years of Torah, in which the children of Israel get out of Egypt, and they start journeying through the desert. And they receive the written Torah. After they receive the written Torah, they also receive the land. After they receive the land, they receive basically a kingdom. A kingdom basically start falling apart with corruption. The same thing with the temple that they created after the tabernacle was kind of replaced by a physical temple in Jerusalem. So the first temple was destroyed, and that was the cause of that was basically the corruption and the hatred among all the people or children of Israel. After that, the development of the ego continues developing. And when I say the ego, I'm not talking only about the children of Israel. I'm talking also about the nations. This is humanity as a whole. Okay, so this is basically the whole history of humanity. We're just looking at what we call the head of the nations, which is Israel. And at this time, Israel was basically descendants of the 12 tribes. They were not yet as Israel today, which is, even though some people might deny it, they're mixed with different peoples of the world. So after that, we have the children of Israel coming back to the land and coming back from exile, and they build a second temple, right? During that time, we have 2,000 years of Torah. The Torah somehow reappears, and then people start studying the Torah properly, and they start, basically following the mitzvot and the precepts, properly. So then after that, we have the 2,000 years of Mashiach. And the 2,000 years of Mashiach starts when we have already, I will say, the Roman Empire in Israel. And then after the revolts and all these type of political issues, and also the hatred among the Jewish people themselves, and also the corruption inside the temple gets destroyed. So the second temple gets destroyed. During that time, we have that the Zohar, after that, gets written around in the 3rd century, and the Zohar then gets rediscovered in the 11th century. But during that time, we also have other books that were written when it comes to Kabbalah. But this book is actually the one that is, we would say, the most important in Kabbalah, because it is said, that it's the study of the Zohar that is going to bring redemption. Why? Because the Zohar covers basically what's going to happen during this time, what is the important work that we need to do during this time. And this time, called the 2,000 years of Mashiach, is actually what we call the legs. So you need to look at the 2,000 years of Tohu as the head, the 2,000 years of Torah as the torso of a body, right? And then the 2,000 years of Mashiach as the legs. And when we say that the end of exile, or the end of redemption, is gonna be or is called the heels of Mashiach, we're talking about these over here, the end of the legs. And a lot of Kabbalists are basically saying that we are already right here at the heels of the heels of Mashiach. And that's the reason we're going through all the situations that we're going, the crisis and all that. And during this time, there's going to be also a revelation of Kabbalah to the public. Before this, Kabbalah was basically hidden within the religious community of Jews only. Then eventually, and after the Ari appeared and his disciples started writing these teachings, then this book started circulating all around, and people were able to understand the Zohar better using the Ha'ari. And then after that, in the 1990s, it was basically revolutionizing to the point that Kabbalah was basically everywhere to be seen. To this day, you can find books of Kabbalah everywhere in any library that you go. Books of Kabbalah in the internet that you can buy. Books of Kabbalah that were translated to different languages that previously were not translated at all. They were all in Hebrew. And also you're going to find a lot of people teaching Kabbalah from different perspectives, but they're teaching Kabbalah. And it's because we are at that time in which we call the heel of the Messiah. Okay? So that's the importance of the word Eikev. And one thing that I was going to also talk about is about the word Eikev also is used in Bereshit, in Genesis, where it says the following. So perhaps this is the meaning of the verse referring to the serpent. This is Rabbi Yaakov Buchaseira. You will bite his heel. This is in Genesis 3:15. The serpent represents the forces of impurity or the forces of division. They only have control over the Jewish people when they trample upon mitzvot with their heel. When they do so, the serpent gains the strength to stand on its feet, and then it bites them for the mitzvot upon which they trample. And then Rabbi Yaakov Buchaseira brings the Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, where he says, if you know not, O fairest of women, follow the heels of the sheep, then you can graze your tender kids among the dwellings of the shepherd. And Rabbi Yaakov Buchaseira said that if the words, if you know not, O fairest of women, it alludes to the future redemption. And when he says follow the heels of the sheep, basically means what we were talking about the heels of the Messiah. And when he says graze your tender kids, it refers to the children of Israel, that they will be clean and pure of all sin as if they were newborns. And you will graze them among the dwelling of the shepherd. The shepherds refers to the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which basically means, the fields of the forefathers is Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, which in Kabbalah we know that the land of Israel is referred as not only the Shekhinah itself, but it's also the level of Atzilut, okay? And also Rabbi Yaakov Buchaseira mentioned the importance of Yaakov when he was born, when he says, his hand was grasping the heel of Esau, as it's in Genesis 25, verse 26. And he says because Esau was the embodiment of the angel Samael, and whenever the Israelites, the Israel basically trample upon the commandments, they don't do it properly with their heels. They straighten Esau's heels, and this enabled him to start firmly upon his feet, just as the serpent, and do as he pleases. So Samael and the serpent basically all the same thing, forces of discord and separation, forces of Tumah, not Kedusha. But if the Jewish people exert themselves and guard themselves, making sure that they do not trample upon the commandments, that they will overcome these forces. And this is the secret behind the name Jacob. When Jacob held the heels of Esau, he was named Jacob based on this, that he, or through him, what's going to be the redemption of the future generations as we know it. Okay, so we already talked about how this whole thing refers, the word Eikev actually refers to 600 years of correction within human history, right? Within ourselves. And what does this have to do with the next subject that we're going to be talking about, which is the subject of eating, right? And they are basically intertwined in the sense that when we eat, we need to make sure that we are basically looking at this as a meditation when we're eating. And it's a good meditation to do not only on Shabbat, but also on every day that we're eating. And we're going to be now studying from chapter 8, verse 9 to 11 on the portion of Eikev. And this verse alludes to the intentions a person should have while eating. And this is, you will find this information in Shar HaMitzvot, Parsha Eikev, that from Rav Chaim Vital. He wrote this according to the teachings of the Arizal. Okay. And he says, a land where you will eat bread without poverty, you will lack nothing in it, a land whose stones are iron, and from whose mountains you will mine copper. You will eat and be satisfied, and bless Hashem your God, for the good land that he gave you. Take care lest you forget Hashem, your God, and not observe his commandments, his laws, and his statutes, which I'll command you today. And those verses have a lot of information right there, and the sense, that he's covering different subjects, but they're all related. For example, when you will eat bread without poverty, has to do with the washing of the hands. You will lack nothing in it, the land whose stones are iron, and from whose mountains you will mine copper. The way you eat, this refers to the teeth and basically the mouth, and the numerical value basically of eating, and how these will actually help release these sparks that are trapped in the lower realms. And a way of eating, and the Arizal actually mentions this, that when we eat, we have to make sure we're not eating only kosher things, but we're eating with a good intention, that we're giving thanks to the Creator afterwards, because in this way we're releasing these sparks that these food have. We're releasing them, we're making them holy again, and we're transforming them into something different than just food, or in this case a vegetable or an animal. We're transforming that into human, into what we are, a higher level. But in order for them to become part of a higher level, we have to be on a higher level. If I am eating only to satisfy myself, what I'm doing is I'm eating just like any animal out there. Therefore, these sparks are not released properly. They go back basically to the lower realm. They're not released. But if I am eating and I have the proper intention, I'm not eating just to satisfy myself, but I'm eating also with the intention to make sure that this food not only nourishes my physical body, but it also nourishes me spiritually, then we're working in this act of redemption of these sparks. And in the Zohar, in Parsha Eikev in the Zohar, in this case I'm reading from the Baal Hasulam commentary, Parsha Eikev, verse 31. It says there are 10 things, and 10 things means, that they actually, it actually alludes to the 10 Sefirot, that one must do for the meal: the hand washing, the preparation of the 2 Shabbat challah loaves, to eat 3 meals and add from weekdays to holiness, to light a candle on the table, as was explained, that a table should be the north side, and the candle on the south, and to recline, as was explained, that if they recline together, one makes the blessing for everyone. So he mentioned those 4 things. Then he continues mentioning on verse 37, the fifth thing is behooves to prepare the Shabbat is the cup of wine. So the cup of wine is the 5th thing. Then he continues to mention all the other parts. But when you study this Parsha of Eikev in the Zohar, you're going to find that it has a lot of deep stuff, a lot of numerical values involved in it. And we're gonna cover some of it as much as we can, because it gets very complicated and kind of confusing, and then we lose the real meaning of what we're trying to achieve here. So let's talk first about the blessing of the bread. Let's follow the Zohar concept. The first thing should be, washing your hands. So it says, from the very beginning, even before eating, a person must wash his hands properly and concentrate while reciting the blessing for hands washing, while saying the words al netilat yadayim, which is upon washing the hands. This is for those of you who don't practice Judaism. What we do is whenever we're gonna eat, especially when we're gonna eat bread, we wash our hands a certain way, and we say a blessing in which we say Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim, and that's basically, blessed are you Hashem our God, who gave us the commandments and commanded us to wash our hands. And according to this, a person should have in mind that the initial letters of the words are ani, which means pour, and these have the numerical value of 130, which is kal, light, as in not heavy, which is the same as the name of Hashem spelled in full, Yohavavha, with the increments. This is the value of the backside and everything, which is, he goes into a very deep subject here, because according to the Zohar. And when we talk about the Yahavaha, what we're talking is actually about the names of Absak, Ma, and Bon. And let me see if I can put it quickly here, so you can have an idea of what we're talking about. Okay, so when he mentioned the Yohavavha, he's talking about Ma. These are the 5 Parsufim, all the way from Galgalta, right? So you have Ab, Sag, Ma, and Bon. So you have Ab, which is 72, and then you have Sag, and Sag is basically Bina in this case. And Ma, this is what he's talking about here, the Yohavavha, is basically Serampin. Then he said that Serampin in increments spelled in full, has basically the value of the backside of Yetzirah, which we're not going to go into that because that's very deep and that's advanced Kabbalah, right? But then he says, when we're reciting the blessing upon the bread, saying Hamotzi, which is a person should have in mind that the letter He from Hamotzi is the first letter of the name Yod He Vav He and correspond to Sephirah Bina. So now we see Yetzirah when we wash our hands, and when we say the Hamotzi, we see Bina, right? Which is the second one, the descending order. The lower He is the last He of the letter of Yod He Vav He, which is the Sephirah Malchut. Then he says, when a person places the food in his or her mouth during the week, since the weekday corresponds to the word of Yetzirah, he should have in mind that most of the food goes to the forces of impurity, while a small part of it contains parts of holiness. So during the weekdays is considered, days of work, days of correction and all that. So these sparks are dispersed within the forces of impurity during the weekdays, which is when Adam sinned. Adam sinned on the sixth day, before Shabbat. And then as we eat them, a small part of it, goes into holiness. And this is why it is required for us when we eat to have the right intentions, to make sure that not everything goes, I don't want to say the word waste, but our efforts go to waste. And extracting these sparks of holiness, according to what Rabbi Yaakov Haseir wrote, it takes place in the thoughts of Abba, in the thoughts of the Father, which is Sephirah Chokmah. Therefore, a person should at least have in mind the proper intentions while eating the first slice of bread. Now, when the food is between your jaws, you should have in mind that the upper jaw represents Chokmah within the Sephirah, Abba, which contains the letter Aleph, which is made of Vav and 2 Yods, which have the numerical value 26, which is the Yod He Vav He. And the name Yod He Vav He belongs to Chokmah, Elohim to Bina, right? The lower jaw represents the Sephirah Bina within the Sephirah of Abba, Chokmah, which contains the letter Aleph written as a combination of the letter Yod, Vav, Dalet, which has the numerical value of 20. When this is added to the 26 of the Yod He Vav He, which is the numerical value of Aleph in the upper jaw, the total is 46, and this is the same value as the name of Hashem spelled in full, Yod He Vav He, or the Sephirah Chokmah, which is Yod He is going to be here, is Ab, okay? So Yod He Vav He, and we talked already about the Yod Vav Ha, washing, eating, right? So these are things, that are kind of advanced for some of you, but just watch this video over and over and write down notes, and you're gonna see some of these will come to you somehow. Because the whole point of Kabbalah is not to understand Kabbalah, it's the intention of receiving the light as we're studying it, okay? So don't try to know everything. There's much more I can add, and you really for sure will not understand everything, but the whole point is the intention of receiving the light as we study, okay? And then he says, after that, the person should keep in mind the attribute of the day. So each day has an attribute according to Kabbalah. And we're not going to go over those attributes here, that's a different class. But each day has an attribute that we need to concentrate ourselves on, because each day has its own tikkun that needs to be made. And regarding the food he eats, by dividing the vav in the middle for the both alephs mentioned above, and we say vav because vav is 6, 6 for 6 days. And so regarding the food that he eats, by dividing the vav in the middle of both alephs mentioned above, lengthwise into two valves. The aleph of the top yaw equals 32, corresponding to the 32 paths of wisdom. Also, you need to understand that this alludes also to the 32 teeth that we have. And then he said when the vav are split, these two alephs have the total value of 58, the same as a whole, adding one for the word itself. And this is also the numerical value of the names El and Yod He Vav He combined, and adding one for the names themselves. So we're going down to a little bit of advanced gematria. I hope you're watching, what I'm putting here, so you can take notes. These names are also in the word of Yetzirah, where Matat or Metatron, the angel over that resides, or rules over the food. This angel's name also has a numerical value of 58, which is the name for the same word, Echo, adding one for the word, and the same as Zon or Zan, sustenance, adding one. When we combine the two aleph without splitting the vavs, their value is 46, and the letters Mem and Vav, this is combined with the letter Son, sustenance, to form the word Mason, which is food, which have the total numerical value of 91, the same as Ma'achol, the food that he eats. Ma'achol, the food that he eats, Ma'achol means also to eat. So then he goes talking about the 32 teeth and the numerical values of these teeth and all that, which we're not gonna go into. But also goes into when swallowing the food, what you should have in mind is basically the Sephirah of Chokmah, which contains the aleph comprised in the letter Yod, Vav, Yod, pushes the food into the throat, which forms the letters Aleph, He, Chet, and Ain, and these letters have the total numerical value of 84. This is the same value of the two aleph with the split vavs, 26, 32 that we mentioned before, combined with the aleph comprised with the letter Yod, Vav, and Yod, which is 26. It says as the food goes down the throat into the stomach, a person should have in mind that the throat represents the Sephirah Bina. Through this trait, the food descends to where the extracting and elevating of the spark of holiness is completed. This is basically the stomach or the digestive system. And he also mentions that you should have also in mind as you eat that these letters Aleph, He, Chet, and Ain, which are formed by the throat, have the same numerical value as Hanoch. And Hanoch is or Enoch. For those of you that don't know the Hebrew name, Enoch, he became, according to Kabbalah tradition, Metatron, the angel who is in charge of the food. The next things to have in mind is the following, according to him, is that the letters Men and Vav that he mentioned before has a numerical value of the two Aleph without the split Vav, which he mentioned, and the letters Nun and Chet, which form the number 58, which is the numerical value of Zan, sustenance, adding 1. The word Lechem, bread, has the numerical value of 78. The word Dak, finally, 104. The letters Pei and Dalet have the numerical value of 84. And the numerical value of the letters Aleph, He, Chet, and Ain, which is 84. And these together, they form, when you add them together, they give you the number 370. This number represents the spiritual lights that descend from the two names of Hashem, L, spelling full as Aleph Lamed. All this results from eating with the proper intentions. When you eat, you have to have also in your mind the name Teth Pei Yod Hey, which is derived from the verse in Bamidbar, chapter 17, verse 11 to 13, and also verse 15, where it says, Moshe said to Aaron, all that kind of stuff. And you will find this information about that name specifically in Shar HaKavanot, page 14b, if you're interested in looking at it. So basically what we have here is from these words that were mentioned by Moshe, we have a whole system of how we need to properly eat. So to put it simple is that when we're eating, we need to have in mind the correction of the day that we're doing. We need to have in mind the intention of basically releasing these sparks or transforming these sparks into sparks of holiness, and we need to be aware of the process of eating as well. All the parts that we're using, what is the meaning, what Chokmah, Bina, Serampin, all the way down, to the time that the food gets wasted by the body. And then he mentions, after that you shall lack nothing, whose stones are iron, which is the teeth, and we mentioned that, from whose mountains you will mine copper. He's talking about the mountains that you will mine copper, is talking about that as you're eating, you're basically releasing those sparks. You're basically releasing the sparks to holiness. And it's alluded by the action of mining copper from a mountain, which is a lot of grinding in order to get the copper out. And then you will eat and you'll be satisfied and you'll bless Hashem your God. This alludes to the Birkat Hamazon, which is that you have to basically give thanks to the Creator for the food that you have at the table at that moment. And then take care lest you forget Hashem your God and not observe His commandments, His laws, and His statutes, which I commanded you today. And it's very interesting that Moshe mentions basically those basically words. Basically, the words in Hebrew are the mitzvah, the mishpatim, and the hukim, which are the laws, statutes, and commandments that is given to the children of Israel. And the commandments, let's go back to the board. So the commandments, the word mitzvot refers to the 63 numeric value name, which is Sag, the name Sag, which is Bina. The statutes, which is the Hukim, Hukot. Here, it's written different because it's referring to them, the commandments to you, the statutes to you, and the laws given to you. So the Hukim refers to Ma. So this is commandments, Hukim, and then the Mishpatim, which are the laws, are bond. Okay? So commandments, statutes, and laws. Okay? So that's what he's referring here. He's referring about all this. Interesting, what you're gonna see is the following, is that most of the correction is done in here, right? Because it's in here in Sag that we're gonna have then the light going down below the tabur, and after the light goes down below the tabur, it gets basically kind of rejection by Malchut, because Malchut doesn't want to receive it egoistically, and then because of a sivug that happens in the Rosh of Bina, and then the light goes all the way down and creates the shattering of the vessels. And then basically Ma Hadash, or Ma, is the word of correction, the word of Asiluth. And then Bon is going to be basically where most of the corrections are going to happen in this area here. Okay? So keep that in mind, because if you're studying intermediate classes of Kabbalah with receiving the upperlight.com, you will see this concept a lot about sag, nekudot sag, and how nekudot sag was the reason for for the lights to come down all the way below the tabur. Okay, so this is basically what we're talking here about, these three parsufim: sag, ma, and bon. Okay. And then Moshe talks about the scene of the calf and how that actually happened. It's retold. Basically, they're reminded of that scene. And everybody knows that that scene was the reason, why we have Yom Kippur and all that. Also, he mentions about the water from the rock, how he had to basically, because of them, basically he's not going to be allowed to enter the land, because he got basically mad at them, and that's the reason he hit the rock twice and all that. So there's a lot more information here than we can cover with the little time that we have. But let's finish with this. It's basically what we need to learn from this. What does eating have to do with what we mentioned in the beginning about the redemption? So what you need to understand is that all these is related to the book of Genesis. What was the sin of Adam and Eve? They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So in order for us to achieve this redemption that we're supposed to achieve by doing the corrections and helping other people achieve corrections as well, we need to have in mind that every action that we make has somehow a spiritual root to it. The eating should be taken like when the Parsu receives the light and internalizes that light. The eating also, we should be having a meditation as we eat, that was mentioned here. We should have a meditation in how this food was basically prepared for us or by us, how we're eating that food, how we're processing that food by grinding it with our teeth, keeping in mind Chokmah, Bina, processing it, and how I am eating this food will actually help me achieve a different state of spirituality, because now the table becomes a place of holiness. The table becomes a place in which I am performing a kind of a sacrifice to the Creator by doing this meditation, by eating properly, in this way elevating the sparks of holiness that are hidden or are covered by the forces of Tumah in that food. And in that way, I'm redeeming those sparks. So that is also related to what we mentioned before about Eikev, the heels. We have to work internally. We have to work really hard in order to help others achieve this goal as well. But this is not a personal goal only. at the heels of the Messiah, where we are right now, we need to now all together join forces and achieve this mission of correcting creation properly by, once again, the one commandment given by the whole Torah. And that commandment is love your fellow man as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And it is very important that we understand that all this is related. Even the act of eating is related to that. So keep in mind that when you eat, meditate on that, especially when you're eating bread on Shabbat. What is the difference between eating on Shabbat and the 3 meals that we're supposed to eat on Shabbat? And the difference, that we learn also here in this Parsha, the difference between eating on Shabbat and the difference between eating on the weekdays. And meditate on that. Meditate on the corrections that need to be done during the weekdays, and the not correction that we don't need to do in Shabbat. That's why we say Shalom Aleichem, that the good angel and the bad angel, they go away because there's no correction to do on Shabbat. There's only the light of Shabbat. Everything is like a way of somehow having a little piece of absolute in our lives, where there's no correction at all. We're in spirituality. So let's think about that, meditate about that. I'll leave you with those words. And like I said, there's a lot of information here. I can go a lot deeper. If you read the Zohar on Parsha Eikev, you're gonna see that it's a lot deeper than just it doesn't touch the Parsha as a commentary. It uses the same thing. It uses the Parsha as a way to introduce the proper way of eating, the proper way of setting up a table and meditating as you eat, and in this way releasing the sparks that are hidden in the food, hidden in the material world. So that's it for now. Thank you very much for being here with us. We'll see you in the next Parsha, which is going to be Parsha Re'eh. And Re'eh actually means see, so we're going to see what the Parsha is going to bring us, what new thing we're going to learn from it. Thank you very much, and Shalom. See you next time.